Oh wait, one more thing. I'm gonna text Scott Holmes and see if he's coming. Okay, let's get started. Meeting is being recorded. Welcome, everybody. This is the special meeting of the Project Development Subcommittee of the Affordable Housing Committee for the town of New Canaan, Wednesday, March 11th, 2026 at 7 p.m. We are doing a hybrid meeting. We have some members on Zoom and some here in the room, so we will do a roll call and get started. All right, Krista Nielsen here, Hillary Ormond.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Bill
Okay.
Perrette does not appear to be here. Bob Strong? Not here. Mike Sweeney?
Here.
Jane Williams?
Here.
And Jeff Williams does not appear to be here. Okay. So the first item on the agenda, I believe I sent with the minutes for this and the material for this meeting, or the agenda for this, the minutes of the last meeting that Jane so kindly wrote up for our March 4th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
All right, moves to approve it. Second.
I'll second.
All right, everyone raise your hand if you're in favor. Great.
Aye.
Hillary, I assume you're in favor since you seconded. All right. So next on the agenda is we wanted to go over the site plans that we received from Memento Emma back in January and receive comment from town staff. For the town staff, you've probably gathered from my emails that we are working towards going to a public meeting and probably doing some sort of survey on these site plans to help us make a better recommendation to our elected officials about which site we think the town should pursue. And so we're just trying to do our homework before we get to that place to make sure that, we know as much as we can as we go public. So for those of you on Zoom, we have here in the room, Sarah Carey, who's the town planner, Maria Coplet, who's the town engineer. I saw Tiger Man on Zoom. Kathleen Holland is here in the room. And unfortunately, I just saw a message from Scott Hobbs that he is not joining us. So I will try and follow up with any specific questions related to the Housing Authority at a later point. So with that said, I wanted to bring up on the screen. Oh, share screen. Just the presentation that we had from Memento Emma that shows these different site plans. So that just so you, I know I sent them to you all, but just so you have a visual and we all have a visual as we're talking through them. Do you guys have any questions for us before we just launch into the site plans? I know we did the site visit in the fall, so I know you're familiar with what we're talking about.
I have a question. Do you plan to socialize all three of these to the public, or are you trying to narrow it down even further?
I think, and committee members, correct me if I've misunderstood, but that we plan on socializing all three of these to the public. And in part, knowing, which you guys now know, that Richmond Hill doesn't provide a complete moratorium by itself. We wanted to show the public that this was kind of the thought process we went through. Like we're not misleading you. We're not making a recommendation without hearing from you first, but there's trade-offs. And I think that's how we will present it to the public, is that each of these site plans offers a series of trade-offs. And when we talk to the public and survey the public, what we're trying to assess is which trade-offs are palatable to people and which ones are not. I suspect size will be one of those. And obviously the trade-off of going with a smaller site is less Hugh points. And so, those are conversations that will have to be had. But that's generally what we're thinking.
Okay.
So the first site plan is Richmond Hill. And as you guys know from scrolling through this, probably there's 2 site plans for each, well, 2 to 3 for each site. So this first Richmond Hill site plan is basically a single building. We'll get to the second one in a minute, but the second one offers more of a townhouse style and it breaks it into 2 buildings. So this is the single building built on top of a 2-level parking structure. I believe you would enter the bottom level off of Richmond Hill, enter and exit the top level off of Park Street. And this, as you are aware, is due to the grade change. And so, everyone else on the committee, feel free to jump in with questions, but I guess I'll just open it to you guys if you have initial thoughts about this one, any issues, comments. We've gone through and done sort of our pros and cons that we see of these, but I'm thinking maybe you'll add something that we haven't thought of tonight, or maybe not.
The one thing, just starting off with parking, that I had a comment on this, and it is one thing that we did discuss during our site visit, is that the adjacent property, the Walgreens property, that there is the potential for subsurface parking. It currently does not have access to it, but it is there. And there was talk about, is there a way to be able to provide some of the spaces that were originally public spaces in Richmond Hill lot in that location, if there's a lease opportunity, if there's some sort of opportunity to be able to make more parking on the Richmond Hill site available for the Richmond Hill project. So I know under the cons, it says entire lot displaced during construction, but I wonder if there is an opportunity to actually minimize that con a little bit by having discussions with the adjacent property.
That's a great idea. Just so you guys are aware, you'll see this as we go through Locust as well. We're, for the public's purposes, trying to just focus on what the town controls. But obviously, there's other discussions on all of these about things we don't control, but maybe could negotiate as we move forward.
I would also just add with the parking on Richmond Hill, just anecdotally, I walk by there relatively frequently, and I think we even noticed it at the site visit that I don't think it is ever parked even remotely close to 100% capacity. So I understand your study was focused on ensuring that you 100% replace the existing parking, but if, down the road, this is the most palatable option for the public, I have to wonder if you could get away with not needing to replace it at 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, thinking, following up on that as well, even post the development of the view, that lot is underparked. So I know they're not supposed to be parking there, but you sometimes think there's an overflow. So that's not happening. I don't see that either. So that's a good thought, that it is underutilized. That lot seems to be to this day.
Yeah. Jane, do you remember what Stacy, the parking manager, had to say about it?
I need to look at my notes to tell you exactly, but her sense was that conceptually it's full in terms of permits, et cetera. That doesn't necessarily mean usage, but I've got to go back and check. The one thing I did ask about the Walgreens underground lot, and she said, we don't have anything to do with that lot, so we don't know. Does it belong to Walgreens itself, or does it belong to the owners of the building if that isn't Walgreens? Does anybody know?
I don't know who owns
I don't
the
know
building.
off the top of my head.
My recollection when the building was developed, this is Kathleen Holland for the record. When the building was developed, it's the owner of the property. So they went ahead and they actually built it to have an underground parking facility, but didn't cut the hole through to do it. They ended up not needing it. So it's in place. And I believe it's not necessarily owned by Walgreens, because Walgreens doesn't utilize it at all.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
It was years ago before COVID of they're doing the boxcar, expanding that.
Yeah.
And down on Pine Street too, where some buildings may be built down there and doing parking where the slope goes down. And I remember thinking, I don't know, maybe it was Moynihan or someone was thinking about approaching them on
think it
doing the
was
boxcar
Moynihan.
thing there.
Yeah, my recollection.
It was the owner, not not Walgreens itself, and Kevin was looking at approaching the owner for us to punch through the wall and utilize the bottom of that building.
Sarah, were you gonna say
Yeah, I was
something?
just gonna say, shifting away from the parking, I do think this specific scheme for Richmond Hill would probably be less palatable for the neighborhood, just because obviously you're surrounded by single family style type buildings. Other than the view, obviously you do have the view, but you know, all around it, you've got townhomes or, you know, detached single family homes. So I do think, you know, for 20 units and then it just being a boxy apartment building in theory
Yeah,
may not be particularly palatable for the public.
yeah, we had that as one of our cons that, you know, there is a single family house next door on Richmond Hill and this would sort of loom over that.
And it's the top of that
Yeah,
part of Richmond Hill, so it,
at the highest point
Yeah.
on the property. Members, any other questions? I almost called you commissioners, not commissioners, committee members. All right, well, Tara and I have been in, this is our third meeting this week, so
we're struggling.
we're down to go as fast as we can through this.
Fine with that.
For anybody who's on Zoom, I'm just gonna scroll, but these were additional views of, I mean, I know everybody on this Zoom knows this is all conceptual. This is not an architectural design of what this would look like. They're just showing the massing. And then some more detail on the parking. All right, so then the other option for Richmond Hill was this option, which I believe parking wise is similar, although it looks like an entry and exit off of Park Street at grade. And then maybe must be a ramp down to Richmond Hill from the parking. I don't remember exactly how the parking worked on this. And then this one, smaller number of units, you lose 2 units, it's 18 units, but more of a townhouse design, which we put in our pros, is probably more compatible with the surrounding built environment. But we're open to thoughts or questions on this one.
I mean, I would just say, this is Sarah Carey, by the way, for the record, that in the future, if the town decided that they were open to having a development that would not 100% get you a full moratorium, I do think that this could be a, you know, much easier project. And again, like I was saying with the parking before, if you didn't need to replace the parking fully for what's already there, I do think that this could be a really attractive site for that type of development. And who knows, you could be able to squeeze a few more units out of it.
Yeah, we also, I think, put on our pros that this would be a great way for this committee at least to start small and bite off something more manageable.
And, you know, realistically, not to jump ahead, but the 2 other projects, you're going to get people concerned about traffic and the impacts, whereas with this one, there's really, you can't argue that there's going to be a huge traffic issue.
Yeah.
We talked about the intersection a little bit as maybe being problematic. No?
Coming
Maybe.
up Richmond Hill.
Yeah.
That's always a
For
little.
the
Currently a little
firehouse.
tricky.
Oh, you're talking about
Oh,
Locust.
the other,
Locust.
sorry.
Locust, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Locust, I think would
Oh,
be
yeah.
I misspoke.
problematic
Yeah.
traffic.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
This location also recently has some development across the street,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
similar. So I don't know if that was happening at the time you were starting your reviews, but the neighborhood is sort of going in that direction of
Yeah.
more townhouse.
But I think we are also realizing, because now that that development is fully up, it's tall and, you know, it's up on a hill. And if you're, you know, lower near Mead Park looking up, like it does impact the
Mhm.
view shed. I mean, it's
Mhm.
blocking the view a little bit, so
Mm-hmm.
that might be a good thing. Yeah.
By the way, I did find the information from Stacy on the parking usage. And just a couple of things that I think are relevant to the conversation. She said for Richmond Hill, all permits are not used at the same time, and that's why there's availability in that lot. It opens up to anyone at 10:30. And it has both commuter and free business permits. She also said that there is a waiting list for that lot. It's not as long because it hasn't been opened up again since COVID. But let's see, what were her stats here? In the past, there was an extensive wait list for both the Lumberyard and Richmond Hill due to COVID. In fact, the people were working from home. We were able to bring down that wait list to 47 for Lumberyard, 18 for Richmond Hill. Now, because more and more people have been asked to come back to the office, those two lots have a very high usage. So we've put any notifications for new permits on hold.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Well, I remember what my thought was on traffic. We talked about the curb cut coming out near Maple.
Yeah, we thought that maybe it'd be better. Well, it kind of messes this design a little, but if ultimately, if we're gonna have a curb cut on Park Street, that it aligned with where Maple one ways into Park Street as well. I just thought it might make it easier, but maybe it doesn't.
So I did note that the other option aligned with it, and I'm actually not sure if that's a positive or a negative, tell you the truth, because one is a public road and one is a driveway. And there's part of me that actually prefers the offset for the driveway as opposed to confusing a driver, at an intersection with a straight run. So I have to think that one through a little bit more.
Okay.
Also, Maple is one way.
It's one way, like coming down towards Park Street.
Correct.
We were wondering whether there's any traffic flowing out of the view causing a problem coming down Maple. I haven't noticed it.
Not that
like,
I've noticed
anecdotally.
either, yeah.
Yeah.
I know our office hasn't received any complaints in the last 4 years about it. Also, having the aligned driveway, if you have cars exiting and they can't go
Up
that
yeah, it
way,
might-
I think it may be confusing.
We'll need barriers and signs just like Elm Street.
Correct.
Folks on Zoom, you don't have to ask questions if you don't have them, but I just want to make sure you know you're welcome to speak up at any point.
But just one last thing, to that point, I would almost offset the driveway a little bit more.
Okay.
I would agree with Maria's point. As well as Sarah's in the beginning, that I think that this is it could be an elegant design for this location.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tiger.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we'll keep
Just
scrolling.
Sorry, Krista, just really quickly for anyone there. So there's you guys can't foresee or think of any or see any apparent like drainage issues or anything that we might not be thinking about with respect to Richmond Hill. I'm just trying to think of things that would not be top of mind for me as a non-builder, non-architect, non-public works, person.
Engineering, there's usually a solution that you come up with. It just might be a little
Okay.
bit more money, but I don't find any concerns in this area about being able to contain it. Currently, it's a, substantially impervious lot. There'll be a modest increase in impervious area, and I don't see there being a problem with mitigating that and probably
Mhm.
even additional some of the existing. And I think in any opportunity that we work within any of these three projects, if we could do not just our minimum that's in our drainage policy, which is the increase in an impervious area, but if we can do more to actually address our goals for our MS4 as a municipality to decrease connected impervious areas, I think that would be a wonderful opportunity.
I'm guessing it would be easier to do that on a smaller site than a larger site, or
I think
Is
it
that
would be
no?
equal.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a wash.
Are there some sites, Maria, that are better located to be sort of a drainage basin for,
Yes.
that's not the right
Yeah.
word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
There is one site in particular, the Locust lot and we talked about this a little bit, the Heritage Hill condominiums there is a pond that was built when the condominiums were developed. The pond is a private pond. We, as a municipality, we don't have any authority over it. It has since been filled in with sediment and thereby significantly lacking its storage capacity. And because of that, downstream in big storm events, we note that on Locust and on Forest, we can have surcharging.
Okay.
And some of the like areas where it has on a parcel that is lower, that has, unfortunately, it was a relatively new construction, but installed drainage lower than our town system, and so has some problems during peak storm events. So if there's an opportunity to actually create storage subsurface in that area, what that does is it just changes the timing. It will still release those waters because I think if I recall, there might be either there were previous buildings in that area, so I don't know how deep we could go. I don't know if there's any restrictive areas, but regardless, what happens is even if you're just detaining, it means that the other peak storms get to move through the system before you release it. So there's still opportunities to improve that downstream watershed.
Mhm. Great, that's really helpful. All right, scrolling through the 3D versions and the parking for Richmond Hill. And then this is just the comparison of scheme 1 to scheme 2. You'll see that we tried, or we advised Amenta Emma that based on what we've heard from the housing authority, what was done at Millport for parking was not sufficient. So we tried to stay right around a 1.2 parking ratio for these. All right, so this brings us to Locust Ave, scheme 1, which again is a big building with a parking garage that faces east on the east side of the building, facing Forest Street. It does not, I don't think, take advantage of the Heritage Hill access that this site has. So I think all entry and exit to the garage and the parking on this site would be from Locust, basically in the same location where the parking is today. We recognize that's a major con and could cause some pretty major traffic issues. But we understand that. We also recognize that this orientation of the garage would make it visible downhill, probably at Forest Street. Unfortunately, with this lot being the size that it is and the location it is right in the downtown core, it's pretty hard to hide a parking garage. So it's just a matter of who has to see it in this version.
So you hit upon the one issue that I have is that there's no access to Heritage Hill. In previous reviews of this property, the fire department themselves have actually stated that the idea of more volume from the current number of parking spaces onto Locust would actually stress their operation. So we don't want to do that. But also, I'm just wondering sometimes on larger parcels like this, because this is bigger than the Richmond Hill parcel, is there an opportunity to have your parking more centralized and then wrap it with residential, understanding that the parcel itself is wrapped with residential on 3 or 2.5 sides? And just wondering if that's feasible at all.
It's a good point. We didn't ask that question of Amenta Emma, and obviously they're not here tonight, so we're not going to have an answer tonight, but I think it's a good thing to point out. You probably saw when we get to Lumberyard, they did do a residentially wrapped garage. So obviously that is an option. I think it's probably a more expensive option, but I also think if we're going to build in the heart of our downtown, it's going to be expensive and it needs to be.
Yeah, it almost seems like this should be flipped. Like the garage should be on the Heritage Hill side, and then like even if you didn't do it wrapped perfectly, but just it seems like the garage should be on Heritage Hill rather than on Locust.
Oh, you mean the entry and exit,
Yeah.
like yeah.
And one of the things that we had, just as a municipality, been reviewing is the idea of if we had two levels of parking, one would solely be fed from Heritage Hill and one would solely be fed from Locust. So then you would have the most efficient parking because you would not have an interior ramp. Because
Mhm.
ramps actually are what make parking garages and parking levels inefficient. So if you would have an access in and off of Heritage, and that's the only way that you could get to that level, and then an access in and off of Locust is the only way you might be able to maximize your parking that way. So maybe you could actually reduce the footprint a little bit to be able to provide more opportunities for units.
Okay. Kind of like what was done on the Richmond Hill lot where there was, one of the schemes showed entry to
Exactly.
one level, yeah.
Exactly. Take advantage of the geography, the topography.
I think this site may be particularly challenging as far as like once you got to actual design, just because you're close to downtown, specifically like the historic district. And then, you do have Houston Lane apartments, and then you have the newer Forest Street development that'll be looking right at it. So I could see this also having some like public issues, just
Opposition, yeah.
kind of like what we saw with the Locust Ave Hotel.
Mhm.
So I would be cognizant of that.
I think that was one of our cons about the loom being up on the hill.
That too.
Okay. Let me scroll through this one. I mean, as you can see from the 3D versions, it's sizable. It looks like a 4 or 5 story parking garage there. I will note that, oh, yeah, the one that we just talked about, does, one of the pros that we liked about it is it does allow space for commercial frontage on Locust on the bottom, on the ground level. I don't think this second option has that, which I don't remember why, but. So this is scheme 2 for Locust Avenue. Similar but different. It's got a building, in this case, fronting on Heritage Hill, and it does have, pretty sure it has an entry and exit. Not fully complete on here, but to Heritage
Yeah.
Hill from the upper level, and then lower level access from Locust. For going to a public meeting, we will be taking off the Forest Street option because that's not something the town currently controls. So that, but I do think that that's something that if the town were to come into control of that could add benefit to this project, but we're going to just consider the project with 2 entrances and not the Forest Street option. So this one I think is less looming. Let's get to it's still big, but it doesn't have that singular 5-story parking garage. It's kind of got sort of like what we saw in Richmond Hill, 2 layers of parking, one with entry off of, I think this is exactly what you were just describing, Maria, one with entry off of Richmond Hill and one, or Locust Avenue, and one with entry off of Heritage Hill. The upper level is Heritage Hill. Trying to remember what we said about this one, but in general, I mean, of the 2, we thought this probably fit better. It does mean that those new apartments on Houston Lane are still kind of looking into the side of a parking garage, which I'm sure is not ideal.
I mean, at this point though, is it a parking garage or is it's literally just like a deck of parking? Like it's
Right.
not like
Yeah, it's not a garage, it's
yeah.
the deck.
So I mean, that's,
But I mean, they're already
It's a
looking at a
parking.
surface parking.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it's definitely not an improvement. I don't know if it's a downgrade.
I mean, I guess, they showed that there was that extra egress onto Forest. I mean, can this design still move forward without it? Were there egress issues?
I'm pretty sure it can still move forward without it. I mean, I pretty immediately wrote back to Emma and said, we're gonna have to remove that. And if this can't work with that removed, I need to know. And I didn't get a response. It was like, that's the only way this works.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that this could work with or without a third access. Obviously, more access, particularly in a busy downtown location, is going to make the circulation issues surrounding adding multifamily in this area better.
It seems like a lot for this
Yeah.
site, you know? But it gets a full moratorium, I guess.
Yeah, so this second scheme 2 gets 76 unit. There's 76 units. Scheme
Okay.
1, I think, was 89 units, that bigger
So pretty cool.
building. Yeah, so I mean, depending on the, number of bedrooms and
Yeah.
whatnot, that could possibly pull
Do we have
moratorium.
a lot size? Like, did we note the density or anything like that?
I don't have the areas off the top of my head.
No, I just didn't know if it was, does it say what the lot size is?
It does not say on these, I mean, elsewhere I do have the lot size, but
Like, I'm just curious if density was,
it's
Like-
going to be pretty dense, I think.
like, do we know? So Canaan Parish and The View are the two densest developments in town. I'm just curious if they're gonna, like, would this be denser than that?
That I don't know. I can get you the answer though.
I don't need the answer. It's more just a consideration, I
Right,
think, for
for
you
the
all.
public,
Yeah,
yeah,
of
like,
just,
For
you know,
people to
try to be up,
understand.
like, if you can be, I would be upfront. Because if it's more dense than those two developments, I think you all want to know that right now.
Fair point.
I can get you guys the density for Canaan Parish and The View if you
Yeah.
want for comparison, but
That'd be great.
let me make a note because I will.
So
forget.
Krista, there was not a significant difference between scheme 1 and scheme 2 in the number of units? What were those
89
numbers
to
again?
76. It is.
89 and 76,
It's a 13 unit.
Yeah.
13 units.
I don't know. I guess I don't think that's huge, to still getting 76 units with this layout, just my personal opinion.
And I mean, I know Amenta Emma used some sort of, they have some basic square footage per unit that can they could make that a 1 bedroom, a 2 bedroom, probably not a 3 bedroom. You probably need, I think it might be 1,500 square feet per unit or something that they
That
average.
could be a 3 bedroom.
It could be a 3 bedroom. It would be at Burtis Street, right? Burtis Ave.
Yeah. Those are like 3,500.
Well, originally when they were
Okay.
trying to give us affordable units that were 600 square feet and 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to move on to lumberyard?
We had talked about last time about a town drainage line that runs down, because I remember the post office and the condos pick up a town line. I think it ends up in Locust. Any concerns about that?
It crosses underneath. That's what I was talking about. If there's an opportunity to actually pull that offline, retain or detain, and then release it, you'll address both your increases in impervious area and also help address some of the concerns of flooding issues in the area. These systems are built beneath parking structures all the time. There's just a creative layout that's done with the footings for the columns, et cetera, but it's not that bad.
Thank you.
Like you said, there's a solution for everything. for
Right.
Engineering, right?
Right.
So,
It just,
yeah.
You're an engineer.
it just sometimes
is it
is
gonna
more,
cost you?
exactly. Yeah. It's more expensive. Well, Tiger's on the line and he'll laugh because he tells me this all the time. They put man on the moon. So
That's right.
this is easy in comparison.
True. All right, so we'll move on. The lumberyard. Oh, this one does have commercial on the ground floor. Focus. Oh, it's on the second floor. I see the lower level. I think given the topography, the lower level might be a little subterranean. I'm not sure.
That's what it looks like because
Yeah.
street level, I think they mean for Locust. And then upper level is the street level for Heritage.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just that comparison. It does not show the size of the lots. All right, so lumberyard, scheme one. Now we're getting into some big stuff. The upside of lumberyard obviously is, well, number one, it's right in the heart of town, right at the train station, our prime opportunity for transit-oriented development. Gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of site design. We're not squishing so much into a little site here. We have more pieces on the board that we can move. The downside is, lumberyard right now has 354 parking spaces that we're saying that we would replace. And so basically we're looking at like a 500 plus car garage on that site for both the residential to be parked at least 1.2 and to put back that. So pretty big garage, not gonna lie. So this one shows the garage backing to the train line, which in theory is probably the right orientation. Nobody's fronting the train line. I think it's 5 stories. Actually, maybe I have it's 4 or 5 stories. So, and that grade, as you all know, is above Pine Street. So if you're standing like at Zoom Box or the foreign car service, you're looking up at a parking garage. Now, you're not fronting on it, but I can't say it wouldn't be visible. But the upside, again, of this lot, in addition to the flexibility, is that it could give us 2 moratoriums if that's how we chose to use it. If affordable housing was what the town chose as the highest and best use of this kind of crucial piece of land, this version here gets us 156 units across 3 buildings, which means it also could be phased. You could build the garage first and then come in and, they didn't number these buildings. I don't know which one's building 1, but I'm assuming it's the long skinny one that fronts on Elm and connects to the garage. That's 72 units. So you may get close to a moratorium just by building that one building. And then you have staging and, flexibility for the future.
So the one thing that I would say on that is constructability wise, you don't want to box yourself in. So if anything, you want to build the one that has the most challenging access to get to, because now you're going to put
building.
Right.
Okay.
Because now you're going to put potentially a building in the way of staging and some of that, constructability. So just to keep that in mind. I mean, there are definitely professionals who would be able to look at that and kind of give you a little bit more perspective as to what would make sense.
Right. Like what order you would do this in.
Right.
I mean, I think this also, because it's a bigger lot and could be done in phases, there'd still be disruption during construction, obviously, for the commuters that wouldn't all be able to stay here, but I don't know that everybody would have to go.
So the other thing to consider, and Tiger, you're on the line, and I don't know, with MTA and DOT, having an active construction site right up against their right of way, there's going to be a lot of controls just to make sure that it's a safe environment. And there's going to be more challenges because of that. It's going to make a more complicated construction project, at least for the garage and the one building that's up against.
Mm-hmm. And we're assuming that if we were to do a building like this one, or you'll see in the other site plans, other options, but a residential building backing up to the train line, that there's probably a requirement for fencing. I mean, obviously kids aren't going to be walking out the back door onto the train track. And I'm pretty sure there's a fence there now. So
there is a fence.
I don't know if it would change, but.
I mean, they're definitely doing that sort of development like in Norwalk and Stanford, where it is right up against, and Darien, or they're right up against
Greenwich.
the train line. So
it's attractive.
Yeah, clearly MTA would deal with it,
but they would have a hand, like you're saying, in sort of the construction process.
Yeah.
Or at least the threshold that the contractors would have to meet, including potentially being, I don't know where the line is, like what their offset would be from their
I see.
right of way that they would have kind of concerns with.
Okay.
Well, to that point, Maria, you're right, but they would have a concern with anything that would have the potential to foul the track. So as you're constructing that deck or say building 3, which I think would be the 48 unit one along that area, that area would be very much, we would have to follow some of their guidelines or all of their guidelines for that. Because anything as we construct it up with the crane, anything that was there, anything that had the potential to fail and fall and foul across the track, so it does become a concern. It doesn't preclude you from doing the work. It's just another concern. It's an added concern.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's take a little scroll on this one. Maria and Tiger, you'll see when we get to the next one, I think what they show on the next one in terms of the station, changing the egress from the actual station parking lot could be added to any of these. Again, I assume there's a level of complexity in terms of dealing with the state on that, but I think that's just sort of like a bonus add-on for any of these. One of the things that I liked as a planner is that they did on all 3 of the schemes for Lumberyard create an interior street to the lot. I think that's better than just trying to build everything. And I think all 3 of them use the egress from that lot on Grove Street as well, which would create 3 distribution points for traffic from the parking garage. I don't know exactly how it works, but.
Do you know, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. So just based on scale, it looked like Grove Street was a 2-way entry, but the interior street looked like it was 1-way. Do we know, because I think
they thought it would be a one-way the way sort of, well, I guess it can operate either way. The one on the right that goes out to Elm Street, is that 2-way or 1-way? I guess it's 2-way.
think right now it's 2-way.
2-way. Okay. Yeah, I would have to ask them.
For flexibility for 500 cars, I would like to see 2-way.
Okay.
Or else you're gonna end up with queuing internally
Yeah.
every time the train comes in, and people are trying to get out of the lot.
Okay. And I assume that comment would hold true for any site design on Lumberyard.
Right, that has the
Yeah.
interior, right.
Yeah, I think they all have this interior street, so. All right, this was the second scheme for Lumberyard. This one, that's 163 unit, 631 parking spaces on this one. This was the only option they showed us that had the parking deck wrapped with a residential liner building. So from 3 sides, you would see residential, including the train tracks. They've tucked the garage, as you can see on the far left, into the Grove Street edge of the lot, which I think for the most part means it would be pretty well shielded by our Business C office building.
Yeah.
Another thing I like about this one is that it hides that pretty massive grade change from the Board of Ed building down to the lot with a residential building that kind of wraps it. So that would be less visible. Maintains the internal street. And like I said, this one does show a sort of a realignment of the parking exiting through, making that connection into the train station parking lot that's owned by the state, and then changing the exit on Elm Street, which would then possibly create some sort of triangular green area there at the intersection of Park and Elm. I think that could potentially be done with any of them. I have no idea how complicated that would be to negotiate with the state, but at least on paper, it looks nice. Thoughts on this one?
Is the parking ratio lower on this one than the first one?
This
Yeah.
is 1.2. Sorry, the only way for me to see is to scroll. And the first one is 1.28.
Well, this comment applies to Locust and Lumberyard, but, you know, if you're gonna end up with a shared parking lot and residential use when it's a, very heavily used public parking lot, it's gonna be vital that that ratio is the sweet spot, because if you end up underparked like you are at Millport, you're gonna just create so many inadvertent conflicts, I think, with the commuters
Yeah.
versus the residents. So I wonder if 1.2 is gonna be too low.
Well, the other thing we talked about is that this is technically transit-oriented development, if we wanted to call it that. I mean, obviously 1.2 would be quite high for a transit-oriented development project. We also understand that in New Canaan, you know, most of the people that live in these buildings probably are not taking the
But
train.
yeah, I mean, you're walking distance to both grocery stores, the
Yeah.
train's right there. So I mean, I hear the point.
Right.
Krista, am I wrong that the parking to unit ratio is based on the parking net gain to the units?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
so essentially the garage would cover everybody that has a space now, or all the spaces that are there now, plus the net gain. So do you have that same concern, Sarah?
Yeah, so I
If
mean,
that
my understanding
1.2
is,
or 1.28 ratio?
so I think 1.2, you know, that's for the units total. I think it all works out. It's just a function of the bedroom count for the units. Like if you end up with a lot of
Got it.
bedrooms, then less of a concern. But if you have a lot of 2 bedrooms, I think
They're
you're more
gonna
likely to
want
run
2
into an
cars.
issue.
so another thing that I
Fair
think
point.
maybe some of these could work out. I don't know which schemes could do it, but we talked about separating levels. Some levels are for, like in this scenario, I don't know.
Yeah.
Levels 1 through 3 are for commuters and levels 4 and 5 are for residents, so that there is, in theory, no conflict between, oh, well, there's an open spot here. I don't really know, you know, and in all of the
Yeah.
scenarios, I think that would be ideal if the residential parking was somehow either, you
Yeah.
know, through a gate
Yeah.
or physically on a separate level,
Definitely.
separated.
The
Yeah.
highest levels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
Some of the designs lend themselves more easily to that than others, and that's where my knowledge drops off. I can't tell you exactly which ones are good for it and which ones aren't, but
So while I'm really a fan in comparison of scheme 1 and 2 of scheme 2,
mhm.
my only concern is that it brings the commuter, their parking further away from the train station.
Yeah.
And so I believe that there's probably going to be concerns on that because precious seconds with catching trains sometimes.
Yeah. Yep, we noted that, I think, in our cons on this one, that it's a bit more of a walk. On the upside, we could sell commuters that they're getting covered parking. Their car will be wet and not covered in snow when they come back, but time may be more important than weather. I don't know. All right, and then after we had our meeting back in January, Miles with Amenta Emma, sorry, I'm just scrolling through so you can see the 3D renderings here of the second scheme for Lumberyard. Miles came back to me with, a very, I mean, not as developed scheme as the first two, which he thought combined some of the best things of 1 and 2 together into a third scheme. And part of it, I think, is keeping that garage pushed up against the Grove Street side. Here, he has turned the garage. No, not really sure.
Looks like you just pushed it down.
Oh, so this is the same garage as in scheme 1, but he's rotated it 90 degrees so that the short end is along the train tracks. It's in the same location as the garage in scheme 2, but it's
Oh, okay.
the same, I'm assuming 550 car garage is in scheme 1, and it's just been rotated 90-ish degrees. We do think that the buildings, these gray boxes for the buildings in here are a little oddly shaped and leave odd open space that is probably not usable. Like, you're not going to have really a backyard for the bottom building that fronts right on the train tracks. Like, it just I know you're also probably not gonna have a triangular building. I'm not sure what the solution is there. But anyway, he did present this as another option to throw out there. So if you have any thoughts on this, let us know.
I mean, I have to assume, obviously, like on paper, it's great that this is, so many units, but I mean, the cost of building a garage that's for 550 cars, I just have to assume that's gonna make it a tough sell long term.
Yeah, he did. I don't have it in front of me. He did give me, in terms of constructability, I mean, I did some rough order of magnitude costs, assuming $30,000 per parking spot and 550,000 per unit. And I think all of the lumberyard came in just over 100 million. So yes, this is obviously the most expensive site, but hopefully you get a lot for it. But then in terms of constructability, he gave me some feedback too as to which options would add. And I think, this garage is probably expensive, though. I think also the residentially wrapped liner building in scheme 2 here is also expensive.
Yeah, I'm just talking about lumberyard in general. I think it's
Yeah,
gonna be-
lumberyard in general is going to be expensive.
So I also think that public perception is going to get a little bit more into the weeds on this one, because I think the perception is that there's opportunities. And I think that one of the reasons why it hasn't been touched is because there are so many opportunities that people are afraid to go forward. So if this gets fully developed, there's therefore perceived to be no more opportunity to develop it. Some idea of mixed use, with market rate, with affordable, with retail, with, is there any opportunity? And it's such a big project to take on as the first one.
Yeah.
I almost, my gut is that one of the other 2 parcels would be a better, a smaller bite, yes, and it won't hit potentially, a full moratorium, like for example, the Richmond Hill. But I think that it would be a good way to kind of cut your teeth.
Yeah, I agree. And we had that as one of our cons, that there's probably a higher use or a higher calling for the lumberyard lot than maybe exclusively affordable housing and
Right.
parking. We have one mandate, and it's the elected officials above us that kind of have to juggle all of those different demands. We just wanted to be able to show what is possible if this was the priority that won out. But I think we all agree that there's potentially a better master planning process that could come up with, something really great for this lot right in the heart of town.
We had that exact conversation. The concern too was that just over the years, there's so many stakeholders that have looked at the property, had their own ideas for it, great ideas, and nothing ever came to fruition. But there's a lot of constituencies in town, and my worry is that even if it became the ideal solution, that it would be death by 1,000 cuts kind of a thing.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like I have looked at multiple master plans for development over my years with the town for this particular location. Everyone has skin in the game.
Yeah.
So this one's a tough one. My overall question though, let's say you have three potential sites. We'll just call it that for right now. At the end of the day, let's pretend you did cite the smaller ones first.
Mm-hmm.
Would this one ever come into play, or would it be the reverse? You do this and you're done.
Well, we're not going to be,
Yeah, you're never.
if the town's priority or strategy is to continue to maintain moratoriums, we're not going to be done for some time. For us to get to 10%.
Yeah,
Pick
I mean, we have what, 300 or 400 and something units?
Yeah, I think we need at least another 400.
I think we need about 400.
To get,
So I mean,
Okay.
this gets you halfway there,
Yeah,
not this scheme on the screen, but
right,
one of them gets you halfway there.
400 to get to
10%.
10% when we no longer can really be threatened with 830G
For now.
for now, until the
Until
law changes.
Not that that's on the table to
Yeah.
change at this moment, but
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
ask you all a question? I'm unfortunately going to have to hang up in a few minutes, and this is so helpful. Does any place come to mind that you're thinking we're missing in town? We're focused obviously on locations, the land the town already owns. And we've ruled out a bunch, but I'm just wondering whether any of you are sitting there thinking, why aren't we hearing about X?
Well, we talked about this during our site walk. I am a fan, for whatever reason, of Morse Court.
Mhm.
I feel it's an incredible location. And I think it transitions nicely with the properties around it, with the library, with our downtown area, with the telephone building across the way. That it just feels like there's a nice opportunity there. And there used to be, like, the history of the property,
Yeah.
well, a boarding house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's kind of a little bit of elegance in kind of going back to its history. So I've always been a fan of Morse Court.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think Morse Court, if we ended up doing something like Locust, I think Morse Court could be a nice bookend on the other side of town. Like you're filling in kind of two prime lots right in the heart of downtown so that you don't have the jack-o'-lantern effect of these vacant surface parking lots where there could be buildings.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be, I think Morse Court probably would be more like a Richmond Hill in terms of the number of units you would get there, especially, I mean, given that it backs right up to Elm Street, you're not going to go 5 stories. You're going to
Yeah.
probably keep it 2 to 3 stories max, maybe townhouse or.
With the facade on Maple and Main being the residential and then the garage being behind, because you
Right.
have the idea,
Morse Court.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Jane, I don't think there's any lots that you're not thinking of, but I personally think the solution long-term is, instead of trying to fit a garage and housing all on one lot, is have a garage on one of those lots, relocate the parking there, and then doing just a housing development and the parking they need for that housing development on that lot.
Separate the
Yeah.
uses.
Interesting.
And there are definitely very creative parking garages that the facade does not read parking garage. You can make it have more of like for example, if you put a parking lot in Locust, you have the post office there, and then even the development around the corner, Brick, you could have a little bit of a continued read on those facades that are on the public street that would have some sort of continuation of that brick. Wouldn't obviously be the whole thing because you need ventilation, but you could have screening that doesn't necessarily, that still allows for all your 100% ventilation, so you don't have to have any interior sprinkler system or anything like that.
Yeah.
The nice thing about what Sarah is saying is you'll notice that the construction costs for residential building attached to a garage are going to be more because of those firefighting issues, the sprinklers and all of that. So there is something very powerful for separating the two uses.
I think it's also just, the garage is really more of a public use, whereas at the end of the day, housing is a private use.
Right.
It's public housing, but it's.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, our charge is to show the elected officials that this could work, but I agree that this may not be the best solution, that they're, if they choose one of these lots that, then you could do the parking somewhere else and do the residential here. I think
Thank
we're
you.
close to done. Does anyone else on Zoom have questions for our visitors tonight? All right.
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for your time and your input. It's really helpful.
And do we have any public comment before we adjourn this evening? All right.
Well, maybe just one thing quick, speaking about other sites, we had a list of, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, and then we whittled them down. to
Yeah,
3.
Morse Court was on there.
Morse Court was on the list. Not sure why we passed on it, but, and then we did pass on, kind of came to these 3. One of the others that was on the list, I know Bill Brett had spoken to, was the leaf pile lot at Waveney. And a discussion of whether you could get, sewer from up on the hill and run it across at Lapham, down to the bottom. We passed on it for a number of reasons, but I just mentioned that to you too. That was one that we looked at that we passed.
Yeah, right now, we have no intent of expanding the sewer district. So that would be a substantial challenge. There's also, to get there, there are a lot of wetland issues. And so I think for that one, logically, it seemed fair that one fell off.
Infrastructure's not there.
Right.
Yeah, that you would need. It doesn't appear to be that the infrastructure's there. That's one that might be a challenging engineering solution.
Yes.
Yeah. It's good to talk about all these sites though, because you want to know that you're doing a thorough job. I think your team has done a thorough job. I mean, that's basically my review of things. You really have drilled down on, plausible locations and vetted the different issues and, coming up with some ideas that hopefully will go forward at some point in time. So I think it's been the plan and the proposals, I think, very well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were pleased with Amenta Emma's work here. So, well, thank you all so much for your time tonight. For the other members of the committee, we're meeting again on March 25th, and we'll start to talk about our public process. And so that's our next meeting. I'll send out an agenda and stuff in advance. But thank you so much for everybody for coming. And I'm going to end the Zoom.
You.
Thank